My wife cried at the funeral of her old friend. I found out 3 weeks later that he was her ex-lover, and half our marriage had been built on lies. So I started visiting his grave and leaving notes with all her secrets. Hey there. We're working hard to hit our first 1,000 subscribers. If you love true, emotional stories, hit that subscribe button. It helps more than you know. Now let's get into the story. I didn't really know the guy in the casket. Not personally, anyway. I'd heard his name maybe once or twice, usually tossed out during some vague story from my wife about back in college. But she never told me much about him, never showed me a picture, never mentioned anything that would have made me think he was important. So when we pulled into the funeral parking lot and I saw her hands shaking on the steering wheel, I just assumed it was one of those moments where grief hits unexpectedly. Even if you haven't seen someone in years, the finality of death can still mess with your head, right? That's what I told myself. Then we walked in, and I noticed something was off. The whole family was sitting up front, dressed in black, obviously mourning, but it was my wife who drew attention. Her sobbing was louder than the mother's. She was clenching a tissue like it was the only thing holding her together, and she didn't let go of my hand once during the service. I remember looking down at our fingers. She wasn't holding my hand for comfort. She was clinging to it, like someone being pulled out to sea. And here's the thing. I'm not heartless. I didn't immediately jump to conclusions. I just thought maybe they were closer than she'd ever let on. Maybe there was more history there, some deep friendship she never got around to telling me about. People don't always share everything. I get that. But then came the photo board. You know those big poster things they set up with a bunch of photos from the person's life? Friends, vacations, birthdays, random goofy moments? Yeah, that thing told me more in 60 seconds than my wife had in 10 years. There were so many pictures of the two of them together. Not just in group shots. Not casual, hey we happen to be in the same place photos. I'm talking arm around waist, forehead touching, full body hug kind of pictures. College parties. Beach vacations. One where she was sitting in his lap. And in every single one of those photos, she had that smile. The one I thought was just for me. That's when I felt it. That slow, creeping tightness in your chest when your gut knows something your brain hasn't caught up to yet. Something wasn't right. But I still didn't say anything. Not there. Not in front of a grieving family. I held her hand tighter, pulled her a little closer, and kept my mouth shut. I told myself it could wait. That I'd ask later. At the reception, she disappeared. I found her out on the porch with one of the guy's old friends. They were talking in hushed tones, and when I walked up, they went silent like I'd crashed a private moment. She introduced me quickly, too quickly, then excused herself to the bathroom. She stayed in there for 20 minutes. That night, after we got home, she barely said a word. Just went straight to the bedroom, shut the door, and didn't come out. I could hear her crying through the walls. Not soft crying. The kind that comes from your chest. Deep, shaking, like it's breaking something inside. And that was the moment I stopped lying to myself. I sat on the couch in the dark for a long time. Tried to make sense of it. I kept replaying the funeral in my head. Her crying, the pictures, the silence, the way that guy's friend looked at me like he knew something I didn't. Eventually, I got up and went to our bedroom. The crying had stopped. The lights were off. I opened the door slowly, and she was curled up in bed facing the wall. I wanted to say something. Ask her straight out. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I turned around and started walking out, and that's when I saw it. The drawer to her nightstand was slightly open. I know how that sounds. I know snooping is a bad look. But something in me just moved. I didn't plan it. I just pulled it open. Inside, tucked under some old birthday cards and receipts, was a photo. Just one. It was her. And him. At some fancy restaurant, both dressed up. She was holding his hand across the table, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. And on the back of the photo, in her handwriting, were 5 words. My once, my always. Jay. I stared at that picture for a long time. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat in the living room with the photo in my hand, staring at it like it would start talking. And somewhere around 4 a.m., something changed in me. This wasn't just some harmless old friend. And I had a feeling this story was much bigger than I ever imagined. I didn't bring it up the next day. I watched her make coffee like nothing had happened. She said her head hurt, mumbled something about being emotionally drained. I just nodded, kept quiet, and waited for her to go to work. The second she left the house, I went straight for her laptop. Look, I know how that makes me sound. I'd never done anything like that before. We'd been married for 8 years, and I had never once looked through her stuff. Never needed to. But now I couldn't stop thinking about that photo. About the way she cried at the funeral. About the look on that guy's face when I walked up. About how she called him her friend. Something didn't add up, and I had a feeling the truth wasn't going to come voluntarily. I opened her email first. Nothing. Clean inbox. No trace of him. No old threads. No saved messages. I almost gave up there, until I saw the label tucked under her archive folders. It was named Old Class Notes. I clicked it. That's when everything cracked wide open. It wasn't notes. It was him. Every single email between them, going back 10 years. From before we got married, up to about 3 months before he died. Dozens of emails. Maybe hundreds. The early ones were what you'd expect. Sweet, flirty, romantic. Talking about how much they missed each other, how hard it was being apart. Then it got heavier. She told him she was thinking about marrying me. He didn't like that. He told her she'd regret it. That I was too boring for someone like her. Her reply? I don't love him. But he's safe. You never were. I just sat there for a minute, staring at those words. Like maybe I'd read them wrong. I hadn't. She went on to say she felt trapped between what her heart wanted and what real life needed. That she was tired of waiting for him to grow up, tired of the chaos, but that she'd never stop loving him. That was 2 weeks before our engagement. I couldn't breathe. I kept clicking. The emails didn't stop after we got married. They just got sneakier, less frequent, more cryptic, like they knew they were doing something wrong. There was a message from 3 years ago when she'd gone on a girls' trip to Colorado. Turns out he was there too. She even joked about how close they came to getting caught. He had no idea you were across the hall, she wrote. You'd be proud of how well I lied. She actually bragged about it. That was the first time I felt angry. Not just hurt, but angry. I'd trusted this woman with everything. My heart, my time, my plans. And she'd been writing love letters to a ghost. When she got home that night, I didn't say a word. Just watched her brush her teeth like nothing had changed. But it had. For me, everything had. Over the next few days, I started to notice things I used to ignore. Her little smiles when she looked at her phone. Her long walks alone. Her sudden need for space at random moments. And all I could think was, how long has she been mourning him? Not just now that he's dead, but the whole time we were married. Has she just been tolerating me while carrying a flame for someone else? The next weekend, I did something I never thought I'd do. I reached out to the dead man's sister. I still had her number from the funeral program. I texted her, asked if we could talk. Told her I had some photos I found and wanted to return. She agreed. We met at a quiet coffee shop, and I expected her to be guarded. Maybe suspicious. She wasn't. When I mentioned my wife's name, she sighed and looked away like she'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. I always thought she'd end up with him, she said. They were obsessed with each other. That was her word. Obsessed. She told me they were on again, off again for most of college. Then again for a while after. Even after he moved across the country. He never stopped talking about her. Said she was the one who got away. She told him she married you out of guilt, she added. Said you were too kind, and she didn't want to break your heart. I didn't even flinch. By then, nothing she could say would surprise me. When I got home that night, my wife was in the kitchen, humming to herself, lighting candles like it was some normal Sunday. I sat down at the table and slid one of the printed emails across to her. Just one line highlighted. He'll never know. You and I will always be real, even if I were someone else's ring. She stared at the paper, didn't say a word. And for the first time in our entire relationship, I think she was genuinely afraid of me. Not because I was angry. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't throwing things. I wasn't even asking questions. I just looked at her, quietly, like I was seeing a stranger for the first time. And she had no idea that I'd already read everything. That I knew about Colorado. About the emails. About the lies. She didn't know what came next. But I did. After I confronted her with that email, she didn't say anything. She just sat there, frozen, like someone had unplugged her brain and all the power drained out. I waited, gave her a full minute to say something, anything, an explanation, a lie, a confession. I would have even accepted a half-baked excuse just to see where her head was at. Nothing. Finally, she mumbled something about the past being complicated and how I shouldn't read too much into old feelings. Old feelings? I didn't respond. I just stood up, walked out of the room, and shut the door behind me. That night, I didn't sleep again. I laid in the guest room staring at the ceiling, wondering what else she'd buried under years of silence and birthday cards. How many lies had I lived with and smiled through? How many times had she looked me in the eye and told me she loved me, while someone else was living inside her head? The next morning, I checked my phone and saw a text from the guy's sister. She'd found something. We met up again that afternoon. She handed me a small cardboard box, nothing fancy. She said she was going through his things and didn't want to keep anything that reminded her of that part of his life. Apparently, he'd left it at her place a year before he died, told her to hold on to it for safekeeping. I took it home and opened it on the kitchen table alone. Inside were a few old photos, a chain with her name on it, and one thick leather notebook. His journal. And this is where things stopped being sad and started feeling straight up surreal. I flipped to a random page in the middle. The first thing I read: saw her again today. She still says she loves me. Told me she never stopped. I turned the page. She said she wanted to have a baby, but not with him. She said it like it was normal. Like it was a given we'd pick up where we left off one day. Another page. I asked her why she married him. She said, because I knew you'd never stay. But he always would. It felt like I was reading a book written by a ghost about the woman I thought I knew. Every page was another knife. Another scene from a movie I wasn't in. She wasn't just mourning him. She never let go of him. Not for a second. She'd built an entire life with me, vacations, mortgage, plans for kids, while emotionally living with someone else. And the worst part? There were mentions of meetings. In person. Multiple. She'd gone to see him when I was out of town. On work trips. During her weekend getaways. She even took him to the hotel we stayed in on our first anniversary. That was in the journal too. I just sat there, reading. For hours. Until the sun went down and the house felt colder than usual. One line, near the end, stuck with me more than anything. She says she has dreams where he dies, and she wakes up screaming. I told her, if I ever go, I want her to remember me every time she looks at him. He meant me. He literally wanted to haunt me. And in a way, he was doing it. After I finished the last page, I just sat still. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't break anything. I just felt empty, like I'd been evicted from my own life. I stared at the box for a long time. His photos, his chain, his words, and the woman they were all tied to. That night, when she came home, I didn't ask where she'd been. I didn't even look at her. Instead, I waited until she went to bed, and then I got in my car. I drove to the cemetery. I didn't know exactly what I was doing. I just knew I needed to see the place, to understand what part of her soul had been buried there, to look this ghost in the face. The gate was still open, even though it was after hours. I parked and walked through rows of headstones until I found it. His name, the same one from the emails, the same one I'd come to hate without ever knowing the guy. Fresh flowers, a candle, a photo of him smiling. I stood there for a long time, longer than I expected. And then I did something that even now, I can't fully explain. I pulled the journal out of my coat and tore out the last page. The one where she told him she dreamed of his death. I folded it, placed it under the flowers, and walked away. Didn't say a word. Didn't look back. But in that moment, a switch flipped in my head. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't even going to leave. Not yet. Because if half my marriage had been built on lies, then I was going to see exactly how far down those lies went. And if this man wanted to haunt me, then fine. I'd haunt him right back. I didn't go back to the cemetery right away. The first visit had been instinct. But the second time, that one was intentional. I waited a week. During that time, I acted like everything was normal. I said good morning, made coffee, folded laundry. I even kissed her cheek once before she left for work, just to see how easily she'd smile at me like nothing had happened. She smiled, and that told me everything I needed to know. She thought it was over, thought I dropped it, thought the silence meant I'd moved on. But I wasn't done, not even close. That Sunday, I went back to the cemetery. No one was there. It had rained earlier, so the ground was soft under my shoes. I stood in front of his grave again, but this time, I brought a folded piece of paper. I didn't say a word, just knelt, slipped the paper beneath the bouquet, and left. The note was simple, just her name. First and last. I wanted him to know I was coming. The next week, I did it again. This time, I wrote a line from one of the emails I'd found. Word for word, her handwriting copied perfectly. He'll never know. You and I will always be real. Week 3, I tore out a journal page and highlighted a specific passage, the one where she told him she wished she had been the one to get pregnant. That if she ever had a child, she'd always wonder what it could have been like if it were his. I folded it and placed it beneath the flowers again. A clean, quiet offering. This became my ritual. Every Sunday, I left something. A sentence, a date, a screenshot, a memory she'd buried but he'd written down, and now I had resurrected. It wasn't about getting caught. I didn't want revenge in the loud, public way. I didn't want to scream at her or post her messages online. I wanted something slower, something she'd feel without knowing why. And it started working. Week by week, I watched her unravel. She became paranoid, snappy, distant in a different way, not because she was hiding something, but because she felt something was coming and didn't know what it was. She started losing sleep, tossing and turning, waking up in the middle of the night just to check the locks. One night, she told me she had a nightmare. She didn't give details, just said she woke up at his funeral again. Except this time, I was the one in the casket. I didn't say anything, just handed her some water and went back to bed. 2 weeks later, she stopped by his grave. She didn't know I was there. I stayed in the car, parked down the lane behind some trees, engine off, just watching. She knelt down, picked up the flowers, and found the note I'd left tucked beneath them. She unfolded it. It was a printout of her text from 2019. He thinks it was a miscarriage. I told him what he needed to hear. You're the only one who ever knew the truth. She covered her mouth with both hands. Then she crumpled the paper, stuffed it in her coat, and walked off without even fixing the flowers. She didn't cry. She looked haunted. After that, the police showed up. Not for me. Not yet. But for her. Someone had reported suspicious activity at the cemetery. Repeated disturbances. Notes left behind. They were investigating vandalism or harassment. I wasn't worried. I was careful. No fingerprints. No handwriting. Nothing that could be traced back to me. Just clean, sharp truths, left anonymously at a dead man's feet. That night, she lost it. She asked me if I'd been going to the cemetery. Said someone was leaving strange notes at his grave. I looked her right in the eye and said, "What kind of notes?" Her voice shook. "Things that no one should know." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe someone does know." She stared at me for a long time. I could see the war happening behind her eyes, trying to figure out how much I knew, how I could have found out, how long I'd been sitting next to her while holding onto a knife. But she didn't ask, because deep down, she already knew. The guilt was eating her alive, and I didn't have to say a single word. That night, she slept on the couch. Didn't even try to explain why. I stood over her while she slept, just watching her chest rise and fall, listening to the way her breath stuttered in her sleep. And I thought about all the lies she told while laying next to me. About how many nights I kissed a mouth that had whispered someone else's name hours before. About how long she'd been grieving a man who, as far as I was concerned, never left her bed. And I realized something. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about us. About how far she'd gone to preserve a lie. About how close I'd been to building a family on top of someone else's grave. I went to the kitchen, took a pen, wrote a new note. I didn't leave it at the cemetery this time. I slipped it under her pillow while she slept. Just one sentence. I know everything. She didn't mention the note. Not the next morning. Not the next day. Not that week. But everything about her changed. She moved like the walls were watching her. Jumped at small noises. Stared at me a little too long when she thought I wasn't looking. She started locking the bathroom door, even when she was just brushing her teeth. She cleared her browser history daily. Put a passcode on her phone for the first time in years. But the truth is, I didn't need to dig anymore. I already had everything I needed. I had her words in his inbox. Her confessions in his journal. I had the sisters' stories. The photos. The timelines. Her pregnancy lie. The hotel. The letters. The grave. I wasn't looking for more. I was looking for the right moment. And it came exactly 3 weeks after I left the note under her pillow. It started with a knock on the door. She was in the kitchen. I answered. 2 officers. Calm. Professional. They asked for her by name. She came to the door and immediately stiffened. Like her bones knew what was happening before her brain did. One officer spoke first. "We're following up on a report made by the family of the deceased, Jeremy L. They've received anonymous materials left at the gravesite, which included private, personal information related to his past relationship with your wife." Her face went white. I didn't flinch. They weren't there to arrest anyone. Not yet. Just investigating. Standard questions. Did she know anything about the notes? Had she been visiting the cemetery? Had anyone confessed to leaving anything? She said no. Softly, barely above a whisper. They nodded, handed her a card, said they might follow up again, depending on what else the family discovered. Then they left. She didn't move for a long time after that, just stood at the doorway, staring at the floor. Then she turned to me. You did this. I didn't answer. She stepped closer. You ruined everything. And that's when I laughed. Not loud, just one sharp breath through my nose. I ruined everything? I said. She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. I gave you everything. My time, my trust, my name. And you gave me 8 years of fiction. Her eyes welled up, but I didn't care. Not this time. You don't get to cry, I said. You cried for him. I watched you. I sat next to you at his funeral while you mourned your lover, the one you never buried. And now that he's gone, you think you can cry your way back into being the victim? Silence. Then I pulled out the box. The journal. The emails. The printed photos. All of it. I dropped it on the table. I know everything. I've known for weeks. She reached for it, and I stopped her. No, you don't get to hide it. You don't get to pretend this didn't happen. I slid a folder out from the bottom. A fresh stack of paperwork. Divorce. Signed. Filed. Stamped. Her name nowhere near any of it yet. But mine? Done. I'm leaving, I said. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Today. She started shaking. You can't just leave like this. I'm not just leaving, I said. I'm giving you exactly what you gave me. Silence. And a future built on the ashes of something fake. I picked up my bag. Already packed. Already in the car. She followed me to the door, panicked. Angry. Pleading. I made a mistake, she screamed. I loved him, but I chose you. Doesn't that mean something? I stopped in the doorway. Turned to her. You didn't choose me. You settled for me. There's a difference. And then I left. But I wasn't done. Not yet. That night, I drove to the cemetery one last time. I brought no letter. No journal. No evidence. Just one small package. A sealed envelope. Inside it, a printed copy of her entire email history with him. Every message, every lie, every date and hotel name, and photo and paragraph of betrayal. I placed it gently under the flowers on his grave, tucked out of sight, sealed with a paperclip. Not for him. For his sister. The next morning, she'd know exactly who my wife really was. And I'd be gone. 3 months passed before I heard from her again. I didn't block her. I didn't go scorched earth. I just disappeared. Took my things. Changed my number. Moved across town. Found a quiet apartment with thin walls and thicker peace. I didn't even take the TV. That first month was strange. Not sad, just strange. Like stepping out of a movie halfway through and realizing you'd been watching the wrong one all along. I woke up one morning and realized it was the first time in years I didn't start the day trying to prove I was enough for someone. That feeling? That was mine. And no one was going to take it this time. But peace doesn't come without echoes. One night, I got a message through an old email I hadn't deactivated. It was her. Short. Desperate. Did you tell them everything? I didn't respond. 2 days later, another one. They know. His sister showed up at my job. She told everyone. My boss. My coworkers. Even my mom. You destroyed me. Still, I said nothing. Because I hadn't destroyed her. I'd just stopped protecting the lie she built her life on. Week after that, she showed up at my door. Hair a mess. Eyes red. Worn down in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. She didn't yell. Didn't scream. Just looked at me like I was someone she used to know, but couldn't recognize anymore. I loved him, she said. I didn't flinch. I loved you too, she added quieter. I didn't speak. You can hate me. I deserve it. But you have to believe I didn't mean to hurt you. And there it was. That line. That soft little knife people use to stab without guilt. I didn't mean to. I finally looked at her. You cried over a man while you laid next to me every night. You wrote love letters while I made dinner. You let me plan our life while planning your escape route. She looked down. I don't hate you, I said. But I'll never believe you again. She tried to hand me something. A letter, maybe. I didn't take it. Then she said the thing she should have never said. I never stopped dreaming about him. I closed the door before she finished the sentence. And that was it. No dramatic goodbye. No speech. Just the sound of a lock clicking, followed by silence. The next weekend, I went back to the cemetery. For the last time. It was early morning. Sun barely up. Dew still on the grass. I stood in front of his grave for a long time. Not with hate. Not with rage. Just stillness. I didn't bring a note. Didn't need one. I'd said everything I needed to say, and some things he never got to hear. I wasn't here for him anymore. I was here for me. I crouched down, adjusted the flowers someone else had left, maybe his sister, maybe someone who knew a different version of him, and I whispered one thing. She's yours now. Then I stood, turned, and walked away. No closure, just a clean break. Because sometimes, the most satisfying ending isn't revenge. It's walking away from the wreckage without needing to light the match. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.